Hello, everybody. Welcome to our show, Maria Arrieta en Vivo. This is live. This is the first time we are going to um, broadcast in English, so bear with me, please. Give me a few seconds. I'm gonna share on Facebook the show right now. Just a few minutes. And I invite you to talk to me, let me know what's going on, what do you think, etc. Just to give you a little bit of an introduction, because we've spoken about, this is our seventh show, so there's a lot of things we already talked about. For example, we explained the supply chain, about the sustainable fashion in general, in the fashion business. Also, what is sustainable fashion, which sustainable fashion is just a philosophy, an area of the fashion industry that takes care of ethical matters, of social justice, with the welfare of animals. So in general, it's a way of doing business in a more ethical way. Right now, well, we also spoke about the 17 goals of the sustainable, the United Nations Sustainable Goals, which are like a roadmap that companies use to, not only the fashion industry, but in general, governments, companies, etc., that they use as a roadmap to sustainability. And it has goals that, for example, to 2030, to reach certain zero numbers, like zero poverty, like Siri just got in the way. Bye, Siri. Siri, bye-bye. Oh my God, one second. Oh, Siri got in the way. Are you there? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, this is, I was talking about the sustainable fashion goals. Please excuse me for all of these little hiccups, because I'm trying to make this work. I'm new to this, and in English it has an extra level of challenge for me. But okay, we're good. So, what are we going to talk about today? Obviously, the coronavirus impacts, and how the industry has been forced to transform. I was talking about the sustainable fashion goals that some companies, little by little, are trying to implement. Some with a little bit stronger in their practices. Right now, the industry is forced to change. I want to give you a little bit of a background, because fashion is always influenced, or fashion influences certain periods in time. For example, we spoke about a few shows ago about how, when the Second World War exploded, how fashion transformed so dramatically because there was so much need, and the supply chain, of course, wasn't working as usual, and how women started to make clothes from whatever they had available, because also they had to go to work, so the clothes changed, of course, to things that were more comfortable. Their materials were very, well, the supply was not as rich as it used to be. So fashion has always been a very important part of evolution, and I'm going to tell you a few things as a background that I found out. For example, when the Victorian era in Europe around the 18,000, like 60 something, very close also to the Industrial Revolution. There was one of the characteristics of this era was tuberculosis. So how does it relate to fashion? Because women, when they got sick, they started losing weight, their skin started to look more pale, their lips became red, and very, very, very skinny. So the idea of this image, which was a result of the tuberculosis, started to be romanticized, and it became fashion. It became the way people thought women looked beautiful. So that's a Victorian characteristic. After that, also men used to wear these beards, which were very elegant at that time. But after some time, when information started to become more available about the germs and the contagious parts of aspects of the sickness, they found out that the beard can hold a lot of germs, so they started to shave, and that became also a trend, like a cleaner trend for men. Also, one of the aspects is that someone recommended that getting sun would be beneficial for the people that were sick. So that's when tanning became also a trend. And interestingly enough, we spoke about this a couple of shows ago when our theme was the International Women's Day, because one of the reasons that International Women's Day originated was because of the textile industry. You know, the women workers around, they started doing marches around the 1850s, something like that, and they started to evolve. But around the 1900s, these marches and protests and everything were focused on the rights. They were protesting for less hours. They were completely abused in every possible way that you can think of. No sanitary conditions, very young women working. In some cases, they wouldn't be allowed to go to the bathroom. Their hours, for example, during the day, somebody found out, the owners found out that if women went to work after eating, that they were less productive. So they started the day work at 5 a.m. in the morning, etc. We spoke about a lot of these things a couple of shows ago. But one of the aspects that's super important about these protests was that also the health aspect was considered, and actually the power of these movements became like the foundation for the healthcare system intimately related to workers as we know it right now. And tuberculosis was called the disease of the garment workers. So this is how fashion relates to everything. It's interesting how we perceive this industry as superficial, vain, but it has so many layers, and we are here to speak about these many layers because many of them, if not all of them, relate to a humane way of doing things versus just a profit, right? After those strikes that happened, a lot of things happened for women and for workers, and the industry completely transformed. Not that these problems don't exist any longer. They right now are located in a different geography, but you know, the industry. What I want to say is that the industry has so much effect in society, and it evolves with everything that's happening. You know? Right now, we're talking about specifically about what all of us are going through with this pandemic, because what the sustainable fashion industry has been asking for from companies and from governments and from people, all of us as consumers, right now it has to happen, because there's no other way that business as usual, as we've been doing things, is going to survive if we don't transform right now. This pandemic has forced us to see things in a different way and in a very dramatic, like super quick way. So we need to, you know, it's forcing us to change things. I know that the industry has been relegated to a second, you know, it's right now, no, we're not thinking about fashion, right? We're not thinking about buying clothes, we're not thinking about all that, but let's never forget that the fashion industry has a supply chain just as any other industry. And I think that with all this that is happening, at least I know us, we are every day seeing more and more of the ripple effects of this, right? It's not only us being at home, but it's the people at the restaurants, but not only the people at the restaurants, but also the waiters, but also the ballet people, but also the people that are being laid off from so many industries, because you know, it's everybody's going through this hardship. So the fashion industry also has this supply chain. It's not only that the store closed and we don't buy, but it's like a domino effect. It has a ripple effect that unfortunately always the most vulnerable are the ones that suffer the most. So if we're talking about tuberculosis at the beginning of like in the 1900s, imagine how this is happening in some areas where the garment workers are concentrated, which is mostly in Asia, right? So we have here that you know, the supply chain has been impacted in such a strong way. What do we do, right? What's the opportunity? How are we to transform? Because the world is still going, you know, we're still moving. It's just a matter of reorienting everything. And many companies are already doing what the fashion industry has been asking for. For example, collaboration, right? So many industries are not prepared for a crisis like this. So many industries just don't have not even the means financially, or the structure, or many other things. So they have to step up, and some of them are. I'm going to give you some examples. Some companies are stepping up to help others that doesn't have that capability and that structure to survive. For example, there's this company online, it's called Farfetched. They sell a lot of products from very little boutiques in Italy, which we all know it's one of the countries that has been more impacted. And the way they're doing, the way they're helping is they're putting online, they're giving more presence to the products of these small boutiques so they can sell more, because the inventory is there, but the stores are closed. So if without this other online system, which has much more capabilities than each and every little store, well, that's the only way they have been able to keep up, no? We spoke about when this all started to happen. I think the focus was more on the sustainability aspect, but recently there was Fashion Week season, right? So fashion weeks all over the world. That we mentioned that Giorgio Armani, because it was starting the virus, but not, I mean, we had no idea this was going to happen. In Italy, they have no idea, obviously. So what he did, I believe this show was in Milan. He closed the doors to the public, and only through online sources people could see the show. So of course they did it for like an extreme measure for what was happening, but the opportunity they saw is that the show could reach much more people online, of course, than the amount of people you can have physically in a place. So that was a huge opportunity for them as a media outlet, advertising, a much bigger opportunity, no? One of the things that has been affected also, this has many layers. I always say this has so many layers. Nothing is just like a straight line, right? For example, many events, like big events, are being cancelled because of the virus. And I'll give you an example. For example, Coachella, this music festival that happens in California, was cancelled, and many companies use this type of events as advertising, because they use the influencers to bring their brands to the events. The influencers do their things on their own. They have a huge following. So of course, when this is cancelled, this is also a huge opportunity of advertising, of media exposure for all these companies that are counting, right? That they have the budget, they put their money on it, they did these campaigns, and when all of this happens, it's also a very big opportunity that they lost. So how do we tackle this? And obviously, there's small and big companies. It's not easy. I think we have to rewrite the system, and one of the things that has to happen is this collaboration. There's companies that are already transforming what I was saying about the war, when industry had to change from doing this into doing that, because it had to be done, because that was what people needed at the moment. Right now, many companies are doing the face masks because they have all the setting, they have the factories, they have the people, they have the textiles, they have everything. They need to still pay their workers because the economy has been hit all over the place. So how to keep going, and it's not in a selfish way, it's how to keep paying for all these workers that I'm telling you about. Well, they're needing to transform what they do, right? So what they're doing, some companies are doing these face masks. I read also about a company that is doing hand sanitizer instead of perfumes. So things like this. Also the language, because how we used to communicate with our customers, in case you are you sell a product, maybe you're counting on the one-on-one interaction, you're counting on having a store open. We're talking about, in some cases, industries that have hundreds, tens of thousands of employees. So how do you keep that going? You cannot just close a store and, oh, let's wait until this this stops. So the language, right, the way we communicate, and we need to realize that where is everybody's attention right now? Online. So that is one way people are trying to tackle this crisis that's impacted everybody. I read about something that interested me very much, which I think can be also beneficial for us. I know some people is not very familiar with what's sustainable, why sustainable, why, why would I buy sustainable? What's the difference? The whole concept of it, sometimes it's a little bit too far from us yet. So I invite you at this time that you're in your house to check on the labels of your clothes, to try to make a little bit of research if you're interested in these kind of things, because you will realize, you will see that companies are not necessarily transparent, and we need transparency right now. It's not only a matter of changing the way of business. It has to be done. So when companies are transparent, they can help, or they can be helped, right? Because if you're clear about your supply chain, this has been affected for this reason, or this can be helped for this other reason. When you join forces with transparency, then you form a stronger group, right? You form a stronger alliance, and whatever is your need might be my strength. And if they put it together, then it becomes a stronger force. So consumers, us, are a huge part of this, right? A huge part of the supply chain, because if we don't buy, then nothing would exist. So how can we take this time to inform ourselves, to understand a little bit more the implications, right? Because as I said, this industry took a second place right now, or even third or fourth, who's thinking about buying clothes right now. But we still do, and we will, because the world continues. It's just right now a matter of adjusting to whatever is happening, but we're gonna go out again. So to take this opportunity to do it in a way that is respectful, that is ethical, that is the way that it should be. It should have been done since the beginning, not only for financial purposes, but for the sake of, the sake of everybody, the sake of our environment, the sake of our animals, the sake of whatever I'm putting on top of my, of my skin. So I invite you to check on the labels, to see if you're curious enough to see and go into the company's websites and find out what are they doing. It's very interesting, and it has so many layers that it's really fascinating. So I think that it's a matter of changing our language, focus where the people are focused right now, change like the boat in this direction. We are trying, now we have to. There's no other option, because I don't believe, and many people don't believe, we're going back to normal, like the normal as we used to know it. We're gonna go out into a transformed, hopefully, idea and understanding of things, starting with our priorities, right? Right now we're seeing we don't need that many clothes, we don't need that many, we don't waste that much. We're paying attention in different things, as opposed as the things we were paying attention just a week ago, right? So, and also a little bit of some of the struggle that I've been through with misinformation, right? I read, well, I think we all read that dolphins are swimming in the Venice canals and animals are reappearing all over the place. That is not true, and I think it's because we're so online right now. We're so focused on the news and whatever's happening. We're abusing a little bit that space, and we're creating more anxiety, and we need to be more sensitive because we don't know who's on the other side of the screen, if they're alone, if they're struggling, we don't know. So just that, I think that we're gonna get through this. This is a huge opportunity for change, and unfortunately it's been pushed upon us, but still an opportunity for change. So I wish you all the best. I hope you find this theme interesting and join me for our next broadcast. Remember that I send every Tuesday, if you didn't hear about it before, every Tuesday I send an email with resources of what I talked about, a little bit of the stories, and also with the show, a link online to YouTube. You can log into mariaarrieta.net. I will send you that email. And that's it. I hope for you the best. Patience. We're going to get through this. I send you this big kiss. Thank you.